Well, hello and welcome to another video from Lanzarote Information. I'm Mike, and today I'm going to be giving you some tips on how to finally learn to speak Spanish. Now, if you're an occasional visitor to the island, you really don't need to learn Spanish. Almost everybody in the resort areas of the island speak English, and you won't have any problem communicating with them. But this video is aimed at the people who are perhaps very regular visitors to the island, or even who live here and who are struggling with coming to terms with learning another language. Now, something I hear very commonly, particularly from people living here who are of the older generations, are, I really wish I could speak Spanish, but I find it so hard, I just can't get the hang of it. So this video is aimed at them, and to try and give you some tips on ways that you can learn Spanish a bit faster, basically on my own experience, but also an understanding of how these things work. And I think one of the issues, if you're doing a language course in a college, or you're using one of the language apps on your phone, is that they tend to focus very much on things we don't really understand about language, because they talk about nouns and adjectives and tenses like past, future, and future imperfect, and so on. And we didn't learn to speak like that as children. So for most of us, those terms are weird. We don't really understand what we're talking about. So have a think for a minute about how children learn a language. And they learn by listening, they learn by repeating, they learn by getting it wrong, and they learn by being corrected by their parents. In other words, they listen, they copy, they get it wrong, and they are corrected. And if we can apply that process to learning Spanish as an adult, I believe it becomes so much easier. The key to me is exposing yourself to as much Spanish as possible and having a go. Because when you have a go, and you inevitably get it wrong, people will gently correct you. Let me give you an example. If somebody walked up to you and said in English, "Where will shop close for purchase food?" you would understand exactly what they're asking you. Even though everything, almost everything in that sentence is wrong, the tense is wrong, the order of the words is wrong, but you know what they're asking for is a shop nearby where they can buy some food. And the same applies when you start to speak Spanish. It doesn't really matter if you get the order of the words wrong, you're saying it in the present tense when you really should be asking in the future tense, and you're perhaps using a female version of a word rather than the male version. People will understand what you're getting at. All you have to do, to coin a phrase, is get it over the net. And what happens is people won't laugh at you. They'll understand what you said. They'll give you the information you need. And if they're like most people who are here on Lanzarote, they will just calmly show you and explain to you how you could say it more accurately, particularly if you ask them to do that. Now, the first tip I'm going to give you is to start reading local Spanish newspapers. They are all online. I read 4 every single day. They are La Voz de Lanzarote, which is the voice of Lanzarote, Lanzarote Digital, Canarias 7, which is the Canary Islands newspaper, and Diario de Lanzarote. And you can just go to the websites, just do a search for Diario de Lanzarote or La Voz de Lanzarote, and they will come up as the #1 thing. Now, click through and start reading the paper, but don't be tempted to go to the translate button at the top of your iPad or whatever you're reading it on, because the trick here is to actually start reading it in Spanish and seeing how much you can understand. Maybe take it a paragraph at a time initially and think, well, can I get the gist of what that's talking about? And once you've done it, you can check your understanding by then clicking the translate into English button and seeing if you got it right. It can be quite painful, it can be slow at first, but it really will build your vocabulary really, really quickly, because you'll be seeing words and thinking, I have no idea what that means, but it's in the context of this, so therefore my guess would be it means X, Y, Z, and you can then immediately check it. So start reading the Spanish newspapers, and it won't just help you with your Spanish, it will help you to have a much better understanding of if you're reading those papers, the ones I recommended, of what's going on the island, what events are coming up, what are the issues being discussed by the politicians, and all that kind of interesting good stuff. Second up, in a similar vein, start watching Spanish television. Now, the temptation for British or Irish people who move to the island, and I guess the same probably applies to German and Scandinavian and Italian as well, is that you end up creating a bubble of home around you. So you read your newspapers from home, you understand the politics from your home country, and you watch television from your home country. So you're still immersed in that little bubble of whatever country you moved here from. And then those same people who end up in that position tell me how frustrated they are because they don't know who their mayor is, they don't understand what the football team on the island are doing, they don't know when events are coming up and so on, and that's because they're not immersed in the bubble of the place that they're living in. They're still immersed in their home bubble, as I said. So you can help that by beginning to watch Spanish television. Now my tip, and we did this initially, is to start watching the news. So the early evening news on one of the local Spanish language TV channels, and turn the subtitles on if you can, but in Spanish, not in English. So you're hearing the person speaking, and the reason I say the news is they tend to speak a bit slower and in a bit more measured way, so you can hear what they're saying, but you can also see the words appearing underneath what they're saying. Now it's quite hard going at first, particularly when you've got almost no vocabulary, because you will just sit there and think, well, what are they talking about there? I don't know. But it helps that they run what they call B-roll across the news. So, you know, you'll see a picture of a tank, and if you hear the announcer talking about tanques, you'll know that that's the Spanish word for tank, for example. So you will gradually begin to pick up things if you watch the news, and just watch a 15, 20-minute news show every night. Concentrate hard, and you'll find that stuff begins to go in. In the same vein, if you can get into some sort of entertainment show on Spanish television, that really helps as well. I mean, our thing when we first moved here, and this is 25 years ago now, and our kids were young, that we started watching a program called Operación Triunfo, which is kind of like a pop star thing. So youngsters compete as pop singers, and they win a prize of getting a recording contract at the end of it. And we became huge fans of this, and all four of us used to sit there and watch this show. And of course the singing was the interesting bit, but initially we used to really struggle with understanding what they were talking about between each song. And you know, we would, when the adverts came on, mute the television and just sort of share our understanding. Was he saying that that singer was brilliant, or was he saying that that singer wasn't very good? And you know, some of us would pick bits up that others hadn't in the commentary between them. So try and find yourself a show that you can watch regularly every week, and maybe one that mirrors something you used to watch in your home country. So for example, the MasterChef franchise is very big here in Spain, and there's a TV program called MasterChef, and it works in exactly the same way as the one you may have seen in your home country. So you'll have an understanding of the process at the beginning, and you'll find again that the words just go into your head. Now, occasionally you'll see intercambios advertised here on the island, and an intercambio is basically an exchange of language. So the organised ones you'll meet at a cafe with a group of people, and for example, if you're going English to Spanish, there'll be Spanish people there who want to learn to converse in English, and there will be English people there who want to learn to converse in Spanish. And the idea is that you have a cup of coffee or a meal with them, and you spend half of that time there speaking one language and the other half speaking the other. And each time the native speakers of each language will do the corrections for you and say, actually, this is how I would say that. Very, very useful if you can find one. But you can also create your own intercambio. And we did this when we first came here. We met a lovely Argentinian couple who owned a pizza restaurant in Arrecife, and we made a deal with them, and we used to go once a week for a pizza with them, and we would only ever speak to them in Spanish, and they would only ever speak to us in English because they really wanted to learn English. And certainly over the year or so that we did that, our Spanish and their English came on leaps and bounds. So it's a real success, and it's real life, if you like. It's not, learning from books. It's sitting down in front of someone trying to find the words to explain what you've been doing that day and what your plans are for the weekend, for example. The next tip I'm going to give you is to use the language as often as you can. And this can be quite frustrating because, particularly if you're in a resort like Puerto del Carmen or Costa de Gise, you will find that if you start off talking to someone who is Canarian in very halting Spanish, they will very politely switch the conversation into English because they know that it's easier for you and their English is probably good. And what you've got to do is to correct them, to say, well, not correct them, but ask them please to keep going into Spanish because you are learning Spanish. So your homework from this video is to go and find out how to say the phrase, I'm learning Spanish, would you mind if we continue in Spanish please, and would you correct me if I make mistakes? So find the Spanish for that, rehearse it over and over and over in your brain so that you know how to say that, and the next time someone switches you back into English, give them that phrase in Spanish. Now the penultimate tip I would give you is this one. Force yourself to go to places where you have to speak Spanish. And this can be quite hard to do because, particularly if you spend all of your time here in one of the resort areas, you really don't have to speak Spanish. But if you visit the north of the island and you want to spend time in Aria and you want to have a conversation with someone in a cafeteria here, you will need to be able to speak enough Spanish to get by. So force yourself to do it and have that conversation. Don't just use English-speaking people to do your house painting and your maintenance and other work. Find some Spanish-speaking people that you can try and have those conversations with as well, for example. So force yourself into situations where you have to speak a bit of Spanish. Now, before I give you the final tip, let me just say that we do these sort of weekly tips videos every Tuesday. Every Thursday we post a video from somewhere around the island where we might just be walking in a resort or we're visiting an activity display or something like that. That's every Thursday. And every Saturday, and this is our most popular thing that we do, we post a video of the news from Lanzarote for that week. So Saturday morning news. If those are of interest to you, please click the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like. And if you've got any questions, just stick them in the comments below. I read every single comment, and 9 times out of 10, I can give you the answer to any questions you have. So let's go on now to the final tip I'm going to give you. And that is to make Spanish a part of your everyday life. If you're serious about learning Spanish, it has to become part of what you do all of the time. It can't be something you do at 4 o'clock every Tuesday afternoon. So how do you do that? How do you make Spanish part of your everyday life? Takes some bravery, I can tell you. But one of the best things I ever did was to turn all my devices into Spanish language, so that on my computer, my phone, my iPad and everything else I use, it's all in Spanish. The operating systems are all working in the Spanish language. So obviously I very quickly had to learn the words for, I don't know, print, save and all of those kind of things. But it just immerses you into the language. When you pick up your new car, the temptation is to switch the language immediately into Swedish or German or Italian or English. Well, leave it in Spanish, and again, you'll learn the words for all of the things that you do in your car, like adjust the climate control, the washer fluid running out, and so on and so forth. Also, when you're searching for something online, try keying in the Spanish words, particularly if you're looking at looking to search for something on YouTube. So, rather than type in on YouTube, how do I wire a plug? type in the Spanish words for how do I wire a plug and watch a video in Spanish. So this is what I mean about immersing yourself in the language and exposing yourself to Spanish as much as possible. It all helps, every little bit helps. Put simply, it's use Spanish to do the things you do every day anyway. Well, I hope that's been useful. Thank you so much for watching to the end. We really do appreciate every view we get on this channel, and we'll be back very soon with another video. Thanks for watching again, and bye for now.